Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Did Shakespeare. My name is Cassidy Cash, that's Shakespeare Girl. This week we're going to be looking at gardens. We're kicking off the first in a series for the month of June, where we're going to take a look at gardens, gardening, Tudor not gardens, and even the utensils that would have been used during William Shakespeare's lifetime to create and maintain a garden. And we're starting out this week by asking the question, did Shakespeare have a kitchen garden? William Shakespeare did, in fact, have a kitchen garden, but the answer to this question is a little bit surprising because when William Shakespeare was living in London, big cities like that wouldn't necessarily have kitchen gardens for every single residence because there wasn't room for that everywhere. And instead, a lot of city dwellers would get their produce either from local markets or directly from a farmer that was selling this for use in the city. And people like William Shakespeare and men in particular very rarely prepared their own meals. Instead, they would stay at a lodging, like William Shakespeare was known to have been a lodger of the Mountjoy family in London. And when he was living there, there would have been a lady of the house or a cook for the house who would have prepared the meals. And William Shakespeare would have eaten that, or he would have gone to a local pub where meals were prepared. And this was where people ate a lot of their meals. If you've checked out my episode on breakfast for William Shakespeare, you'll remember that they didn't really eat breakfast. So this would have been his lunch or his dinner that he would have eaten where he was living or at one of the local pubs. So for William Shakespeare, when he was in London, the idea of a kitchen garden wasn't really one of the things he would have worried about. But when he went home to Stratford-upon-Avon, his birthplace there on Henley Street would have likely had a garden that supplied the home with its produce. And we do know that his home at New Place, once Shakespeare made his name in London and went back to Stratford-upon-Avon and bought that famous second largest house in town, the grounds there were much more extensive and he would have had a kitchen garden there. Now, what exactly was a kitchen garden? Well, the idea of a grocery store didn't get invented until 1916 when Clarence Saunders launched his Piggly Wiggly line of grocery stores in the United States. So before that, if you wanted to eat, you had to grow it. And kitchen gardens were set right off of the kitchen of a home, and they were filled with all of the fruits and vegetables, herbs and spices that you would want to cook with, you grew in the garden. And so you would just go outside your kitchen and get what you grew and bring it in and prepare it for all of your meals. And this was just a normal thing. It was literally farm to table eating, but it wasn't some kind of expression the way it is now. This is just the way that people ate. Now, in Stratford-upon-Avon at New Place, while Anne Hathaway could have prepared the meals, it's also possible that they would have hired a cook. Being this well off by the time he bought New Place, he would have had a staff there that helped Anne Hathaway maintain the properties. They had over 100 acres of land that was farmed there, and so they would have had workers that helped them handle all of that. But Anne Hathaway could have prepared some of the meals in the kitchen herself, and certainly she oversaw all that was happening when her husband was frequently off in London, which was almost a full week's journey away. So she was very much in charge of and maintaining their properties there while he was gone. So she was involved in what got planted in their family kitchen garden. Some of the vegetables and fruit that they might have planted, we get an idea from the actual Tudor era kitchen garden that is maintained at Hampton Court Palace. Now, this is an actual garden that you can go and you can visit there at Hampton Court Palace, but it's set up to be reminiscent of what would have been there when royalty was operating out of Hampton Court Palace, specifically under Henry VIII. Now, what's interesting about the one that's at Hampton Court Palace right now is that it has, I think it's 254 individual garden plots as part of it, and that's only 1/6 of the size that it would have been during its heyday when Henry VIII was preparing meals there. Now, remember, Henry VIII is Elizabeth I's father. But some of the fruits and vegetables that they've planted there include things like zucchini. In England, they call that aubergine. I have no idea if I'm saying that right. That's a French word for zucchini. But they also had squash and, things like rosemary and thyme. They even will train fruit up the walls. Their website says that they have apricots that bloom and grow trained up the walls there. I'm not sure how all of that works, but they have it planted there. And if you'll check the show notes for today's video, I'll link you over to the website where you can see pictures of Hampton Court Palace's kitchen garden and how they have it set up there. And it's a really neat website because they also explain for you how they grow it and the different growing seasons. And they have a whole lot of very fun things over there. Interestingly, they do mention on their website that they grow tomatoes as part of their fare there. And that deserves more investigation than I can give it for today's episode. But I will tell you that historically, tomatoes were thought to be toxic. So I want to personally look into whether or not it's authentic to Shakespeare's lifetime to have tomatoes in a kitchen garden, but that is something we will look into on another video. For today, the answer to this week's question is yes, William Shakespeare would have had a kitchen garden. It would have been much smaller than what they have at Hampton Court Palace and just enough to maintain and feed the house and servants there at New Place. Although we do have record of one royal monarch actually stopping in to visit Susanna Shakespeare there at New Place after William Shakespeare's death. So they were high-ranking enough to entertain royalty on occasion, but they didn't require the same massive garden that you would have needed at a palace where you're entertaining courtiers and things like that. But it would have been filled with similar produce, and the plants would have been grown in individual plots. Visually, it looks a lot like what today's raised garden beds look like, except the beds weren't necessarily raised. If the ones at Hampton Court are solid examples of what Shakespeare would have had, instead it's just intentionally marked out rectangles and you're planting certain kinds of food in each one. So that's it for this week. I'm Cassidy Cash, that's Shakespeare Girl, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. To download a short guide, a list of plants that would have been grown in a garden for Shakespeare's kitchen garden, you can sign up for the newsletter. There's a link below that you can do that. I send out emails every Monday with updates on the latest podcast episodes as well as the latest YouTube videos, just like this one, so that you don't miss out on any Shakespeare history. And you can also download that guide to the kind of plants that Shakespeare would have had in his kitchen garden. So check below for that. If you would like the mini course on Shakespeare and gardens, you can sign up to become a member of That Shakespeare Life. We've just launched this membership platform, and inside are mini history courses. The new one that will be there for June is called Shakespeare and Gardens. It will be a series of videos along with a full ebook and guide on how to plant your own Shakespeare garden. A traditional Shakespeare garden includes the 175 plants that get mentioned in Shakespeare's plays. We'll show you how to do that, but we'll also show you how to plant a kitchen garden similar to what William Shakespeare would have had. So if you're like me, and you don't have room for 175 plants, we'll show you some of the plants that you can grow that are authentic to William Shakespeare's lifetime, and they're edible. So you can grow them and eat just like William Shakespeare. To get that ebook and the full access to the mini course, though, you do have to be a member. It's only available inside the membership, and you can sign up for that at cassidycash.com/member. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.